First off, if you haven't signed the graduated income tax ballot measure, please sign. Let me know. DM if you need a place to sign. I will hook you up. Don't sign any of the other ones. They are from billionaires and they are BS. Now I'm going to talk about, and this is, I have tried to film this 3 times. I am sorry. It is technical, it is confusing, and it is a lot of information. For the past 10 or so days, we've been working on the data center issue, and we found a lot of crazy, to me, information. And so I'm going to go through it. It's going to take a while. This is going to be a long video, and it's not going to be recommended by Instagram. I was going to try to break it up, but it's just too much, and it's a lot, and it all kind of ties together in various ways. So let me just say, it feels a lot like we're being gaslit by CS Utilities and by the City Council. Let me go into it. Let me go a little bit into our appeal. The primary issue to me with our appeal, and the reason why, we felt it was so important beyond, was basically, while we had the planning department documents, they felt very incomplete. The most relevant issues, environmental impacts, besides geological impact, wastewater disposal, water consumption, both direct and indirect, weren't in the planning documents department's website, in all of the documents. We didn't have information about these things, which seemed really, really important. So they seem to be things that Colorado Springs Utilities would have information on. So one thing that was floating around was from a local high school student who had obtained a document from Raeden entitled 1615 Garden of the Gods, Power Overview and Approach, which he got with a Cora request. And in it, it contained this passage: how much represents enough? AI data center deployments will literally use as much power as the utility or other generator distributor can provide. If 1615 can support 100 megawatts of gross power, and I'm going to put this on my YouTube too, on July 1st, 2026, the customer will use 100 megawatts of gross power. The basis of design allows Raeden to subsequently build out kits in a very predictable manner, such as long as power exists, the kits will install up to 300 megawatts critical power, 420 megawatts gross power. And the gross and the critical are hard. To fully utilize all the space and resources at 1615, despite the normal and natural perception of data centers as underutilized hogs of power, just wanting to control the capacity but not using anywhere near the contact and maximums, modern AI data centers want and will use the power as quickly as possible. So the thing is, I put in a Cora request because I wanted more information about, and with that local students' help, about what Colorado Springs Utilities had done to deal with this request. Because what we found, according to Raeden, is that, let me get to it, is that Colorado Springs Utility already purchased and contracted the power needs to operate the data center. So what we were hearing from Raeden prior to the project being approved was that CS Utilities had already paid for that power. And we didn't ever find out what that amount of power was until we look at integrity matters. So we were hearing 50 megawatts of power. What does 50 megawatts of power mean? 50 megawatts of power means it would be about equivalent to the power use of 50,000 people. 100 megawatts would be about equivalent to the power use of about 100,000 people. So 300 megawatts of critical power would be about equivalent to 300,000 extra people in Colorado Springs. So you would think that there would have to be some kind of study done to understand how that would impact us. Well, when I did a Cora request, there were no documents returned. I said, okay, did I put it under the wrong name? Because it's also called, let me find the right name. It's already also called Corporate Ridge number 1, lot 4. And they said no. And I asked about water. I asked about wastewater. Nothing had been done because it hadn't been put in. So how could CS Utilities have already bought the power, which to me would say that we don't have the capacity for it without having any studies done? Additionally, we were hearing 50 megawatts of power. The last The last project that was in was at 50 megawatts of, I think, critical power and 70 megawatts of this gross power. So then we hear from Integrity Matters. And all of this, I am sorry this is complicated. I am sorry that I'm going through so much to find this and that there are so many sources. It is not easy, and that is why it's crazy. So let's go into what Integrity Matters found, which I found insane. Integrity Matters looked at this much more from a sound perspective. And what they found was that the sound test that was done, which was on 36 chillers and 36 generators, and 30 generators, that in the final document, it was 72 chillers and 60 generators. So that would be 100 megawatts of power. So we're hearing nothing is like, and that would be like, that could be close to, like, that's at least 30 megawatts more as the last one. It could be up to 140 megawatts more. We don't know if it's critical power. We don't know if it's just general power. Like, we don't know. And that doubles the sound, at least. And we also have, so there's a lot of questions on that. And I'm so sorry that this is so messy. So basically what we have from CS Utilities is one document. And in that document, they ask for unlimited power. They ask for up to 300 megawatts of critical power, which would be the equivalent of adding 300,000 people to our power grid. And when we look at that, we don't have any studies explaining how that's supposed to happen for us. And then I found another issue that was really huge and a really huge problem. I looked through because I wanted to figure out what the heck CS Utilities had been doing about this. Well, all of the Utilities Policy Advisory Committee, which is a citizens committee that advises the Utilities Council, had not met from March to June. You know what was happening from March to June, and I don't know if this is connected or not, that was when Project Taurus started to become public. Then I looked into all the utility board meetings, and I also did check up, and all those utility board meetings from October 2025, which is when we think that document was created, and there were no mentions of this project. There were executive sessions with the city attorney. You know what that means? That the public does not have information about what they are talking about. If the city attorney is in there, they don't have to report what they're talking about. There's Swire Coca-Cola plant, which is going to use 1.5 million gallons of water. That also wasn't mentioned. But you know what I did find, which I found to be insanely insane. Okay, and I also want to point this out, is that on February 18th, 2026, a sentence to the electric large load schedule, which per a previous meeting is designed to be cost effective and protect the rest of our customers from costs associated with the infrastructure or resources serving large types of loads, which is 10 megawatts or more. Well, a clarifying sentence has been added that gives Springs Utilities the ability to execute economic development special contracts to customers receiving service under this rate. Board member Risley stated that he was very vocal about this change and clarified he wanted the change made to both the tariff and the URRs, so this would not be an impediment to potential prospects who look more closely at the tariff itself and not just the rules and regulations. Chair Donaldson asked for a thumbs up from the board to put it on the consent item at Colorado Springs City Council meeting on February 24th, 2026. All of the board members provided a thumbs up, and it was adopted at the City Council meeting on February 24th, 2026. So what does that mean? Basically, we had this thing that was supposed to protect us. Apparently, there's still always been the option to execute an economic development special contract. What that means is those protections to us, for us to not have to pay for the consumer and to not have to pay for the infrastructure, to not have to pay for to pay more money for power. All of those protections can go away in that economic development special contract. So when Raeden says Raeden can only use power under a year plus old special program called a large load use tariff, under the tariff, Raeden must pay for any and all infrastructure costs necessary to obtain power at 16.15 person. First off, obtain power is not the same thing as necessarily building out the infrastructure for that power. It's just for them to be able to have it there, from what my reading is. And then CSU's large load tariff exists, published and open to the public, absolutely zero costs applicable to Raeden at 16.50 apply to any other customers of CSU. That's not true. That's just a friggin' lie based on this extra sentence. So we don't know what's going on with this project. I feel extremely gaslit. Everything has been behind closed doors. There have been no meetings that have had any effect except for two informational meetings with Raeden. And all the answers have been extremely inconsistent. There's only 60 to 100 jobs associated with this plant that is apparently going to be extremely noisy because it's already under 100 megawatts of power. We are like this data center, and because we don't have any information, we don't have any good information about it. We don't know how they're disposing of wastewater. They say that they're using a closed circuit cooling system. Well, is that going to apply when they build out? Is that going to apply for only the first 50 megawatts? Is that going to apply for 100 megawatts? We don't know. We don't know how they're disposing of the water, which is toxic. And CSU Utilities has already bought the energy. So thanks for this very long little thing. The city approved this project without any studies looking at the actual costs required to sustain this business. What I worry about is that they're going to get a bunch of money up front. And then we're going to have to pay for a bunch of new infrastructure. We're going to have to pay higher rates to pay for their energy use. This is a stupid Band-Aid on a problem, and they need to be real. We also can't handle, Swire's Coca-Cola bottling plant, which is only bringing 170 permanent jobs, but requires 1.5 million gallons of water daily during a drought. And again, with power use, when we're using 100 megawatts of power, that also requires water to create that power. So the city is apparently in $30 million of debt, and we need to frankly talk about the city's budget and raising taxes, but we can't approve massive businesses because of short-sighted backroom deals. We can't put a bomb in so that people can try to get some money now and then have to deal with the bomb later. Thanks for listening. If you have questions, ask them. I'm sorry that this is confusing. I'm going to say at the end here some of the big takeaways. Basically, the only document from CS Utilities is Raeden asking for as much power as they could possibly get. Apparently, CS Utilities has already bought that power, which appears to be 100 megawatts, even though we've been told it was going to be 50 megawatts, which also increases the sound. And also we have had inadequate sound tests. I'm talking to somebody that's going to try to run a sound test. None of these sound tests have been done with the actual equipment that's going to be used. And inside their plans, they say that the equipment may change. So, what does that test mean if we don't have the actual equipment being used? And additionally, we don't have any protection from from the needed infrastructure and changes to our power grid and the extra use to go on to all of us consumers in Colorado Springs. I say no on Project Taurus. I also say no to the Coca-Cola bottling plant. We need to change the way that we are approving projects in Colorado Springs to make sure that utilities are taken into account because it affects us all. And it's also important that CS Utilities understands that even if it's harder for them to service individual customers in in Colorado Springs, we are the community that owns you. These businesses are not who you are required to be, you are supposed to be responsible to. And you need to be listening to what the community wants and not just deciding that this big load is going to somehow be good. We have to stop continuously expanding our energy use and be much more efficient. And this is just idiotic. There is nothing beneficial coming to us from Raeden. I have not seen anything about this that's been useful, that's been a good idea for us. We have so many data centers in the US compared to other countries. We do not need another one. We do not need a big waste of energy. We do not need something that could double the energy use of the last project. And these things all should have been studied before it was approved. All right, bye-bye.